What happens when the weakest becomes the strongest? When the abandoned returns to face those who cast her out? Tonight, I bring you a tale of betrayal, survival, and the thin line between redemption and revenge. This is the story of a she-wolf who was thrown away like trash, only to return as the salvation her former pack desperately needs. If you love stories of powerful transformations and second chances, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our supernatural tales. Chapter 1. The rain fell like tears from a grieving sky the night they cast me out. I was barely 6 years old, my wolf not yet awakened when Alpha King Darius Blackthorn stood before our pack and declared me worthless. The memory burns in my mind like a brand, his steel-gray eyes cold as winter storms, his voice cutting through the assembled wolves like a blade. "This child bears no scent of our bloodline," he announced, his massive frame towering over my trembling form. "She is weak, wolfless, and brings shame to the Shadowmoon Pack. By the ancient laws, I cast her out." My mother, Luna Elena, had died giving birth to me. My father was unknown, a scandal that had whispered through the pack for years. But I had hoped, foolishly, that my alpha would show mercy, that the man who ruled our territory with an iron fist might find compassion for a motherless child. The pack elders stood in a semicircle behind him, their faces carved from stone. Elder Morgana, who had delivered me into this world, wouldn't even meet my eyes. Elder Thomas, who had once given me honey cakes when I scraped my knees, turned his back entirely. These were the wolves who had known my mother, who had sworn to protect her child, and they watched my condemnation in silence. "Please," I whispered, my small voice barely audible over the rain. "I'll be good. I'll be strong." "I promise." "Promises from the weak mean nothing," Darius snarled, his canines extending. The transformation was partial but terrifying, his human face elongating, his eyes blazing with amber fire. "You have until dawn to leave our territory. If you're found here after sunrise, you'll be hunted like the rogue you are." I remember looking around desperately for someone, anyone who might speak for me. There was Sarah, the Omega who cleaned the pack house. She had always been kind to me. But she stared at the ground, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. There was Marcus, barely older than me but already showing the promise of a future warrior. He watched with wide eyes but said nothing. The pack watched in silence as I stumbled into the darkness, my bare feet slipping on wet leaves. Not one of them spoke in my defense. Not one of them offered shelter. I was 6 years old and I was utterly alone. The first night nearly killed me. I had no survival skills, no understanding of the wilderness that stretched endlessly beyond packlands. I found a hollow log to shelter in, but the cold seeped through my thin nightgown like ice water. Strange sounds echoed through the forest, howls that didn't belong to any wolf I knew, the rustle of things moving through the underbrush, the distant scream of some creature dying in the darkness. I cried until I had no tears left, then lay shivering and listening to my stomach growl. By morning, I was so weak I could barely stand. The wilderness became my teacher, and pain became my constant companion. For 12 years, I survived in the spaces between pack territories, the no-man's lands where rogues and outcasts scraped out brutal existences. I learned to hunt with my bare hands before my wolf ever emerged. I learned to fight dirty, to run faster than death itself, and to trust no one. The first rogue who found me was a grizzled old wolf named Cain. Half his face was scarred from some long-ago battle, and he walked with a permanent limp. He could have killed me easily, should have by rogue law. Instead, he looked at my pitiful state and made a decision that saved my life. "Your pack," he said, sniffing the air around me. "Shadowmoon, what did you do to get yourself exiled, pup?" "I was born," I whispered, my voice hoarse from crying. Cain's remaining eye went hard as flint. "Ah, one of those alphas." He spat in the dirt. "Come on, then. Can't leave you here to die. The others won't like it, but they'll listen to me." The rogue camp was a collection of makeshift shelters hidden deep in a canyon that no pack claimed. There were maybe 20 wolves there, all exiles, all carrying their own stories of rejection and betrayal. They taught me things no pack wolf would ever learn: how to move silently through any terrain, how to read the wind for danger, how to kill quickly and efficiently when mercy wasn't an option. But it was Cain who became my true teacher. He'd been a beta once, in a pack far to the north, before his alpha's paranoia led to his exile. He understood strategy, politics, and the deeper currents that moved through werewolf society. Power isn't just about being the strongest, he told me one night as we sat by the fire. It's about understanding what people want, what they fear, and how to use both. Your old alpha feared you for a reason, pup. Figure out what that reason was, and you'll understand your true strength. When my wolf finally awakened on my 18th birthday, she was unlike anything I'd ever heard described. Where most wolves were brown, gray, or black, mine was pure silver, her fur gleaming like moonlight on water. Her eyes burned gold, and her howl could shatter glass. The transformation itself was agony beyond description. Most wolves experience their first shift gradually, with family and pack healers to guide them through the process. Mine hit like a lightning strike, tearing through my body with such violence that I thought I was dying. I shifted alone in the wilderness, with only Cain's gruff encouragement to anchor me to sanity. When it was over, when I finally stood on 4 legs instead of 2, I felt the world differently. Every scent was magnified, every sound crystal clear. But more than that, I felt complete for the first time in my life. "We are not weak," she whispered in my mind the first time we shifted. We never were. Her name was Luna. Ironic, considering I'd been denied the title that should have been my birthright. But she was mine, and together, we were unstoppable. I spent 4 more years honing my abilities, learning from the rogues who'd taken me in, studying the ancient texts they'd stolen from various packs. Cain had an impressive collection of forbidden books, histories that most packs had tried to erase, accounts of the old ways before the rigid hierarchies took hold. I discovered things about werewolf history that most alphas had forgotten: old magics, forgotten rituals, and bloodlines that stretched back to the first wolves. There were stories of wolves who could command the elements, who could speak to the spirits of the dead, who could bend reality itself to their will. "Your bloodline is older than most," Cain told me one evening as we pored over a particularly ancient tome. Shadowmoon wasn't always just another pack. They were guardians once, protectors of something important. That's why their territory is where it is. They're sitting on a convergence point. A convergence of what? Power, he said simply. Raw, primal power that flows through the earth like blood through veins. Most of the current pack probably doesn't even know it's there. But you would. You'd feel it calling to you. He was right. Even from hundreds of miles away, I could feel something pulling at me. A constant, subtle tug toward the lands of my birth. I'd assumed it was homesickness or unfinished business. Now I understood it was something far more significant. And then the dreams started. Visions of my former pack in chaos. Wolves dying of a mysterious plague that turned their fur black and their eyes hollow. I saw Darius, no longer the proud Alpha King, but a broken man watching his people waste away. I saw the Shadowmoon territory overrun by something dark and hungry. The dreams came every night for a month, each one more vivid than the last. I saw children I didn't recognize, wolves who had been born after my exile, suffering for crimes they'd never committed. I saw the great forests of my childhood withering and dying, the streams running black with corruption. But most disturbing of all, I saw myself in the dreams. Not as I was, but as I could become. A figure of terrible power standing over the ruins of everything I'd once called home. The dreams came every night for a month before I finally understood. They weren't just dreams. They were a calling. The pack that had abandoned me was dying, and somehow I was the key to saving them. Cain tried to talk me out of going back. "It's a trap," he insisted. "Or worse, it's destiny. Either way, it'll probably get you killed." "Maybe," I admitted. "But I can't ignore this. Something is calling me home and I need to know what." "Then take backup," he said. "Take the pack. We'll follow you anywhere, pup. You know that. I was tempted. The rogues had become my family in ways the Shadowmoon Pack never had. But this felt like something I needed to face alone. This is my burden, I told him. My choice. If I don't come back, you'll come back, Kane said firmly. You're too stubborn to die easy. But if you don't, we'll come looking for you. And we'll burn that territory to the ground, finding out why. On a cold October morning, I stood at the border of Shadowmoon territory for the first time in 16 years. The scent markers were weak, desperate, nothing like the strong territorial claims I remembered from childhood. The very air tasted of sickness and fear. I was no longer the frightened child they'd cast out. I stood nearly 6 feet tall, my silver hair flowing like liquid metal down my back. Scars decorated my arms and shoulders, each one a lesson learned, a battle survived. My eyes had turned the same burning gold as my wolf's, and my presence radiated power that made even the trees seem to lean away. I was Lyra Nightshade now, a name I'd chosen for myself when I realized no one else would ever give me one that mattered, and I had come home. The first patrol found me an hour after I crossed the border. 3 wolves, all of them showing signs of the plague, their fur patchy and dull, their movements sluggish. They surrounded me with bared fangs, but I could smell their weakness. "Rogue," the lead wolf snarled. "You're trespassing on Shadowmoon land." I smiled, and it wasn't a kind expression. "I'm no rogue, Marcus." The wolf's eyes widened in recognition. Marcus Ironwood. He'd been a young warrior when I was exiled. Now he looked old beyond his years, his face gaunt with illness. The boy who had watched my exile in silence had grown into a man marked by suffering. "Impossible," he breathed. You're dead." The Alpha said many things," I interrupted, my voice carrying the authority I'd learned to wield. "Most of them were lies. Take me to him, now." Marcus hesitated, clearly torn between duty and disbelief. His companions looked to him for guidance, but he seemed as lost as they were. Finally, he nodded. He's not well. The sickness. I know about the sickness," I said quietly. "That's why I'm here." As we made our way through the territory, I was shocked by what I saw. The Shadowmoon Pack had once been the strongest in the region, boasting over 300 members. Now I counted maybe 50 wolves, all of them showing various stages of the plague. Houses stood empty, their windows dark. The great training grounds where I'd once watched warriors spar were overgrown with weeds. The pack house itself was a shadow of its former glory. Paint peeled from its walls, and several windows were boarded up. The gardens that Luna Elena had tended so lovingly were nothing but dead earth. Even the great oak tree where she used to read to me had withered, its branches bare and brittle, and there, standing on the front steps as if he'd been waiting for me, was Alpha King Darius Blackthorn. 16 years had not been kind to him. The man who had once seemed like a god to my child's eyes was now clearly mortal. His dark hair was streaked with silver, his face lined with exhaustion and grief. But it was his eyes that shocked me most. Those steel-gray orbs that had once been so cold now burned with desperate hope. "Lyra," he whispered, and my name on his lips sounded like a prayer. I stopped 10 feet away from him, my chin raised in defiance. "Alpha King," I said formally, my voice dripping with ice. "You look unwell." He flinched as if I'd struck him. "You came back." "I came back," I confirmed. "Though not for the reasons you might hope." Darius stepped down from the porch, his movements careful and measured. I could see the wolf in him was weak, struggling against whatever poison was killing his pack. "I know you have every right to hate me. What I did to you was exactly what I expected from a man who values strength above all else," I finished. "Tell me about the plague, Darius. Tell me how the mighty Shadowmoon Pack brought this curse upon themselves." His face crumpled with shame. "It started 3 months ago. Wolves began falling ill, first the elderly, then the young. They're wolves. They just fade away. We've lost over 200 pack members. Our healers are baffled. Other packs won't help us, afraid the sickness will spread. And you think I can help you?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The worthless child you threw away? The weak little girl who brought shame to your pack? You're not weak, he said quietly. You never were. I was a fool. A blind, arrogant fool who couldn't see what was right in front of him. I studied his face, looking for deception, for manipulation. But all I saw was genuine regret and desperate hope. It should have satisfied me to see him brought so low. Instead, it just made me tired. The plague isn't natural, I said finally. It's a curse. Someone with very old magic and a very deep grudge has targeted your pack specifically. His eyes widened. How do you... Because I've spent 16 years learning things that comfortable pack wolves never bother with, I snapped. I know about blood magic and ancient grudges. I know about the sins of the past coming back to collect their due. I turned to walk away, but his voice stopped me. Please. The word was broken, desperate. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I know I destroyed any chance of your forgiveness the night I cast you out. But my people are dying, Lyra. Children who had nothing to do with my mistakes are suffering because of my failures. I looked back at him over my shoulder. And what makes you think I care about your people? They watched me get exiled and did nothing. They're as guilty as you are. You're right, he said simply. But you came back anyway. That has to mean something. Will Lyra help the pack that abandoned her, or will she let them face the consequences of their alpha's cruelty? The choice she makes next will determine not just the fate of the Shadowmoon Pack, but the destiny she's been running from her entire life. Chapter 2. The curse reveality should have walked away. Every instinct I'd developed over 16 years of survival screamed at me to leave them to their fate. But as I stood there looking at Darius, this broken shell of the man who had once seemed invincible, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Curiosity. Show me the affected wolves, I said finally. All of them. Relief flooded Darius's features, but I held up a hand before he could speak. This doesn't mean I forgive you. This doesn't mean I'm staying. I'm here because something is killing wolves, and that affects the balance of our entire region. Nothing more, he nodded quickly. Of course. Thank you, Don't thank me yet, I cut him off. You might not like what I find. The pack hospital was a scene from a nightmare. Wolves lay in various stages of the plague's progression. Some still in human form, but with their wolves clearly dying inside them. Others stuck in partial shifts that looked agonizing. The smell of sickness and despair was overwhelming. But underneath it all, I caught something else. Something that made Luna pace restlessly in my mind. Dark magic, she growled, old and angry. I moved through the ward, ignoring the shocked whispers of the pack members who recognized me. At each bedside, I placed my hand on the patient's forehead and let my enhanced senses probe deeper than any normal examination could reach. The first patient was a young mother named Claire. I remembered her vaguely. She'd been a teenager when I was exiled, one of the ones who'd whispered cruel things about my parentage. Now she lay unconscious, her breathing shallow and labored. When I touched her forehead, I felt the curse like a living thing, wrapped around her life force and slowly draining it away. But there was something else. A signature in the magic that felt familiar, like a scent I'd caught on the wind years ago. The second patient was an elderly wolf named Thomas, one of the elders who had stood silent during my exile. The irony wasn't lost on me. His condition was more advanced. I could barely sense his wolf anymore. The curse had nearly consumed him entirely. As I moved from bed to bed, a pattern began to emerge. The curse wasn't random. It was targeting specific wolves. Those who had been present at my exile were affected more severely. Those who had spoken against me were dying faster. But there were also children here, babies who couldn't have been more than a few months old. They were suffering for sins they'd never committed, and that made my blood boil. This isn't just a curse, I told Darius as we left the hospital. It's a very specific kind of blood magic. Someone is systematically draining the life force from your wolves and feeding it to something else. Feeding it to what? I stopped walking and turned to face him. That depends on what your pack did to deserve this level of hatred. Blood magic this powerful requires a personal connection to the target. Someone with Shadowmoon blood is behind this? Darius went pale. That's impossible. All our bloodline is accounted for, is it? I raised an eyebrow. Tell me, Alpha King, how many children has your pack exiled over the years? How many weak wolves have you cast out to die in the wilderness? The guilt that flashed across his face was answer enough. I need to see your pack records, I continued. Every exile, every banishment, every wolf who was deemed unworthy of the Shadowmoon name. And I need to see them tonight. Lyra, it's late. Perhaps in the morning. Your wolves are dying faster each day, I snapped. By morning, you might lose 3 more. Do you want my help or not? He led me to his office in the pack house, a room I remembered from childhood nightmares. The massive desk where he'd signed my exile papers still dominated the space, though it was now covered with medical reports and desperate correspondence with other packs. The walls were lined with portraits of past alphas, their painted eyes seeming to watch our every move. I recognized some of them from the stories my mother used to tell, great leaders who had built the Shadowmoon Pack into a force to be reckoned with. What would they think of what their legacy had become? The record books were kept in a locked cabinet behind his desk. As he pulled them out, I noticed his hands were shaking. How many? I asked quietly. How many what? How many children, Darius? How many children did you throw away because they didn't meet your standards? He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he whispered, 17. Over the past 30 years, 17 children were exiled for various deficiencies. 17. I felt sick. And how many of them do you think survived? I don't know. I never checked. He trailed off, the weight of his actions finally hitting him. You never cared, I finished. They were just problems to be disposed of. I spent the next 3 hours going through the records, cross-referencing dates and family lines. What I found painted a picture of systematic cruelty that made my own exile seem almost merciful by comparison. Children as young as 4 years old, cast out for being too small. Twins separated because one was stronger than the other. A little girl exiled because her wolf was the wrong color. The list went on and on, each entry a life destroyed by one man's obsession with perfection. There was Michael Stormwind, exiled at age 5 for showing signs of anxiety. Sarah Moonwhisper, cast out at 6 for being too emotional. David Ironheart, banished at 8 for questioning pack traditions. Each name was accompanied by clinical notes about their supposed deficiencies, as if they were livestock being culled rather than children being condemned to death. But it was the last entry that made everything click into place. Raven Nightfall, I read aloud, exiled 15 years ago at age 7 for unnatural abilities and suspected dark magic. Daughter of... I looked up at Darius, whose face had gone ashen. Daughter of your brother, Marcus Blackthorn. Marcus died in a rogue attack 20 years ago, Darius said quickly. He never had children. According to this, he had a daughter with a witch named Selene Nightfall. A daughter you exiled because her magic scared you. I slammed the book shut. A daughter who would now be 22 years old and very, very angry. The pieces were falling into place with horrifying clarity. Raven Nightfall, a child with both werewolf and witch blood, cast out by her own uncle for powers she couldn't control. She would have grown up in the same brutal wilderness that had shaped me, but with access to magic I could barely comprehend. She's your niece, I said, my voice deadly quiet. Your own blood, and you threw her away like garbage. She was dangerous, Darius protested. Even as a child, she could make things happen. Unnatural things. The pack was afraid. The pack was afraid of a 7-year-old girl? I stood up, my power radiating outward in waves that made the windows rattle. You were afraid of a child, so you sentenced her to death. And now she's come back to collect what you owe her. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Papers on his desk began to flutter without any wind, and the portraits on the walls seemed to shift and move in their frames. How do we stop her? He asked desperately. I laughed, but it was a bitter sound. Stop her? Darius, she's been planning this for 15 years. She's not just killing your pack. She's making them suffer the way she suffered. Alone, afraid, and abandoned. There has to be something— There is, I said quietly. But you're not going to like it. He leaned forward eagerly. Anything. I'll do anything to save my people. The curse can only be broken by someone with stronger magic than the caster, someone with a deeper connection to the Shadowmoon bloodline. I met his eyes. It has to be broken by family. But I don't have any magic. I'm just a wolf. Not you, I interrupted. Me. The silence that followed was deafening. I don't understand, he said finally. I pulled out a piece of paper I'd found tucked into the back of one of the record books. A birth certificate that had been hidden away for 24 years. My birth certificate. My mother wasn't just Luna Elena, I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. She was Elena Blackthorn. Your sister. Darius stared at the document as if it might bite him. That's impossible. Elena never— She couldn't have children. The healers said— The healers were wrong. Or maybe they lied to protect her secret. I set the paper down between us. Either way, the truth is right there in black and white. I'm not just some random orphan you exiled, Darius. I'm your niece. I'm Shadowmoon royalty, and you threw me away because you were too proud to admit your sister had fallen in love with someone outside the pack. The color drained from his face completely. Lyra, I didn't know. I swear to you I didn't know. Didn't you? I leaned back in my chair, studying him. Or did you suspect and choose not to look too closely? It was easier to believe I was worthless than to face the possibility that you'd made a mistake. He buried his face in his hands. What have I done? You've created two very powerful enemies, I said matter-of-factly. Raven wants revenge for her exile, and now she has it. But I'm betting she doesn't know about my true parentage. If she did, she would have targeted me specifically. What does that mean? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dying packlands. In the distance, I could see the cemetery where my mother was buried. I'd never been allowed to visit her grave, never been given the chance to say goodbye. It means I have a choice to make. I can walk away and let Raven finish what she started, let the Shadowmoon Pack pay for the sins of their alpha. Or? I turned back to face him, and for the first time since I'd returned, I let him see the full weight of my power. The air around me shimmered with silver light, and my eyes blazed like twin suns. Or I can challenge her directly. Blood magic against blood magic, family against family. Winner takes all. And if you lose? I smiled and it was sharp as a blade. Then you'll have lost two nieces instead of just one. But at least you'll finally understand the true cost of your cruelty. Darius was quiet for a long moment, processing everything I'd told him. Finally, he looked up at me with something that might have been hope. If you do this, if you face her, what do you want in return? Nothing, I said simply. I'm not doing this for you, Darius. I'm doing it because Raven is killing innocent wolves to get to you, and that's not justice. That's just more cruelty. But if you survive, after I disappear again? This pack made it clear 16 years ago that I don't belong here. That hasn't changed. It could, he said quietly. Things could be different now. You could take your rightful place. My rightful place? I laughed harshly. My rightful place was at my mother's side, growing up loved and protected. My rightful place was learning to control my powers with guidance instead of desperation. You stole that from me, Darius. You can't give it back. He flinched as if I'd struck him, but he didn't argue. He couldn't. How do we find her? He asked instead. We don't find her, I said, moving toward the door. She finds us. Raven's been watching this pack for months, probably years. She knows I'm here by now, and she knows what I am. The question is whether she'll see me as a threat or an opportunity. What do you mean? I paused in the doorway and looked back at him one last time. I mean, dear uncle, that your niece might try to recruit me instead of fighting me. After all, we have so much in common. The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows and sending dead leaves skittering across the ground. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, but it wasn't a sound of mourning or pain. It was a sound of challenge. Raven knew I was here, and she was coming. As Lyra prepares to face the most dangerous enemy she's ever encountered, she must decide not just how to break the curse, but whether the pack that abandoned her deserves to be saved at all. And somewhere in the shadows, Raven Nightfall is watching, waiting, and planning her next move. Chapter 3. Blood Calls to Bloody didn't have to wait long. She came to me in the hour before dawn, when the veil between worlds is thinnest and magic flows like water. I was sitting by the lake where I used to play as a child, letting Luna stretch her legs in the pre-dawn darkness, when I felt her presence. Power. Raw, ancient, and absolutely furious. "Hello, cousin." I turned slowly, unsurprised to find a young woman standing at the edge of the tree line. Raven Nightfall was beautiful in the way that dangerous things often are, all sharp angles and predatory grace. Her hair was black as midnight, her skin pale as moonlight, and her eyes were the deep purple of a brewing storm. She was also radiating enough magical energy to level a small town. "Raven," I said calmly, not bothering to shift back to human form. Luna's silver coat gleamed in the starlight, and I knew the sight of me would send a message. "I was wondering when you'd introduce yourself. Were you?" She stepped closer, and I could see the family resemblance now. The strong jawline, the aristocratic nose, the way she held herself like she owned the world. "And here I thought you might be too busy playing savior to notice little old me." "Hard to miss someone who's been systematically murdering an entire pack," I replied. "Though I have to say your technique is impressive. Blood magic isn't easy to master." She smiled, and it was sharp enough to cut glass. 15 years of practice will do that. Amazing what you can learn when you're fighting for survival in the wilderness. I know the feeling. Do you? Her eyes flashed with anger. Do you really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you came crawling back to Daddy the moment he called. I stood up, my wolf form towering over her human one. Darius isn't my father, and I didn't come back for him. No? She tilted her head, studying me. Then why are you here, cousin dear? Surely not out of the goodness of your heart. I'm here because you're killing innocent wolves to get revenge on one guilty man, I said bluntly. Children who had nothing to do with your exile are dying because of your anger. Raven's expression darkened. Innocent? They watched me get dragged away screaming and did nothing. They're as guilty as he is. Some of them were children themselves when you were exiled. Some of them weren't even born yet. And some of them cheered, she snarled, her human facade cracking to reveal the rage beneath. Some of them called me monster and freak and said I deserved whatever happened to me. I could see the pain behind her anger, the same pain that had driven me for so many years. But pain didn't justify what she was doing. The air around her began to shimmer with dark energy, and I caught glimpses of her true power. It was vast, deeper than anything I'd ever encountered. She'd had access to her witch heritage from the beginning, while I'd only recently discovered my own magical abilities. In terms of raw power, she might actually be stronger than me. So you became the monster they said you were, I observed. How's that working out for you? Her laugh was bitter as winter wind. Better than playing the hero, I imagine. At least I'm honest about what I am. And what's that? Revenge, she said simply. I am the consequence of their cruelty, the price of their indifference. I am what happens when you throw away something precious and pretend it never mattered. Despite everything, I felt a stab of sympathy for her. We were more alike than I wanted to admit, two children abandoned by the people who should have protected us, shaped by years of hardship and betrayal. It doesn't have to be this way, I said quietly. You could stop the curse, walk away, start over somewhere else. Could I? She stepped closer, and I could feel the magic radiating off her in waves. Could you? If you had the power to make them pay for what they did to you, would you really just walk away? The honest answer was that I didn't know. I'd fantasized about revenge for years, dreamed of coming back strong enough to make them all regret their choices. But seeing the actual cost of that revenge, the innocent lives being lost, made it feel hollow. Maybe not, I admitted, but I'd try to find another way. There is no other way, she said fiercely. They only understand strength and fear. Love, mercy, forgiveness. Those are weaknesses to them. The only language they speak is pain. You're wrong, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it. Some of them are capable of change. Darius? Darius is a coward who only cares now because his precious pack is dying, Raven spat. Where was his remorse when we were children? Where was his guilt when we were starving in the wilderness? She had a point, and we both knew it. Join me, she said suddenly, her voice dropping to a whisper. You have power, Lyra. I can feel it burning in you like a star. Together, we could remake this entire region. No more alphas casting out children. No more packs built on cruelty and fear. For a moment, I was tempted. The idea of never having to watch another child suffer the way we had suffered was appealing. But the cost, and how many innocents would die in the process? I asked. As many as necessary, she said without hesitation. Revolution is never bloodless. That's where we differ, I said, shifting back to human form. I won't sacrifice innocent lives for the greater good. I've seen too much death already, her expression hardened. Then you're a fool, and you're in my way. The attack came without warning. One moment we were talking, the next the air around me exploded with dark magic. Tendrils of shadow wrapped around my limbs, trying to drag me to the ground, while whispers in a language I didn't recognize filled my head. But I wasn't the helpless child I'd once been. Silver light erupted from my skin, burning away the shadows like they were made of paper. I felt Luna surge forward, lending me her strength, and suddenly I was moving faster than thought itself. I tackled Raven around the waist, sending us both tumbling into the lake. The cold water shocked us apart, and we surfaced on opposite sides of a small inlet, both breathing hard. Impressive, she panted. Treading water. But you're still holding back. I can feel it. She was right. I was pulling my punches, afraid of what might happen if I let my full power loose. But Raven had no such reservations. The lake began to boil around her as she called on magic that felt older than the mountains themselves. The water turned black as ink, and things with too many teeth began to surface around me. I swam for shore as fast as I could, but the creatures were faster. Claws raked across my back, drawing blood that glowed silver in the darkness. The pain was incredible, but it also did something unexpected. It made me angry. Really, truly angry for the first time since I'd returned. I spun in the water and let my power explode outward in a wave of pure silver fire. The creatures dissolved instantly, and the lake water cleared so quickly it was like someone had flipped a switch. Raven's eyes widened in shock. What are you? I'm what happens when you push a blackthorn too far, I snarled, walking out of the water with steam rising from my skin. I'm what our family becomes when we stop holding back. She scrambled backward, suddenly looking very young and very afraid. That's impossible. No werewolf has that kind of power. You're right, I said, advancing on her. No werewolf does. But I'm not just a werewolf, am I? Neither are you. Understanding dawned in her purple eyes. The bloodline. The original bloodline, I nodded. Our great-great-grandmother wasn't just the first Luna of the Shadowmoon Pack. She was something else entirely. Something that got bred out of the line over generations until only traces remained. Until us, Raven whispered. Until us, I confirmed. 2 throwaway children who inherited the power our ancestors tried to forget. The revelation hung between us like a bridge we could either cross or burn. I could see Raven processing this new information, trying to reconcile it with everything she thought she knew about herself. Our great-great-grandmother was Selene Moonweaver, I continued, drawing on knowledge I'd gained from the ancient texts Cain had shown me. She wasn't just a werewolf. She was a bridge between worlds. Part wolf, part witch, part something else entirely. The first alphas were terrified of her power, so they made sure it was diluted over the generations. But it didn't disappear, Raven said slowly. No, it just went dormant, waiting for the right combination of bloodlines to awaken it again. I gestured between us. Your mother was a witch. Mine was a blackthorn. We're the first in 5 generations to carry the full inheritance. For a moment, we just stared at each other, two young women who had discovered they were far more than anyone had ever imagined. Then Raven's expression hardened again. "It doesn't matter," she said. "Power doesn't change what they did to us. It doesn't erase the pain." "No," I agreed. "But it gives us a choice about what we do with that pain." "I've already made my choice." "Then I've made mine too." The second battle was nothing like the first. This time, we both fought without reservation, power meeting power in a clash that shook the very foundations of the earth. Trees exploded into splinters around us. The lake boiled and froze and boiled again. The sky above us crackled with unnatural lightning. We were evenly matched, and we both knew it. For every spell she threw, I had a counter. For every burst of silver fire I unleashed, she had a shield of shadow. We could have fought until dawn and beyond without a clear victor. But then I heard it. A sound that made my blood run cold. Howling. Desperate. Agonized howling from the direction of the pack house. The curse was accelerating. While we fought, more wolves were dying. "Stop," I called out, lowering my hands. "Just stop." Raven paused, a ball of dark energy crackling between her palms. "Ready to surrender?" "Ready to make a deal," I said. "One challenge. Winner takes all. But we do it properly, by the old laws with witnesses and binding oaths." Her eyes narrowed. "What kind of deal?" "If you win, I'll help you destroy every pack in the region. We'll remake the werewolf world according to your vision. And if you win, you break the curse and disappear. Forever." She was quiet for a long moment, considering. Finally, she nodded. "When?" "Tomorrow night, full moon. Maximum power for both of us." "Agreed." She started to turn away, then paused. "You know you can't win, don't you?" "I've been planning this for 15 years. I know every spell, every trick, every weakness." "Maybe," I said, "but you've forgotten something important." "What's that?" I smiled, and for the first time since I'd returned, it was genuine. "I'm not fighting for revenge, Raven. I'm fighting for redemption, and that makes all the difference." She disappeared into the shadows, leaving me alone by the lake with the taste of magic still crackling in the air. I had less than 24 hours to prepare for the most important battle of my life, and I had no idea if I was strong enough to win. The stage is set for a battle that will determine the fate of not just the Shadowmoon Pack, but the entire supernatural world. As the full moon rises, two cousins with the power of gods will face each other in combat, but victory may come at a price neither of them is prepared to pay. Chapter 4. Redemption's Price. The full moon hung like a silver coin in the star-drunk sky, casting everything in sharp relief. I stood in the center of the ancient stone circle that had been used for pack challenges since the Shadowmoon territory was first claimed, feeling the weight of destiny pressing down on my shoulders. Around the circle, the surviving members of the pack had gathered to witness what might be their salvation or their doom. Darius stood at the edge of the crowd, his face haggard with exhaustion and fear. In the past 24 hours, they'd lost 8 more wolves to Raven's curse. The stone circle itself was older than the pack, carved by hands that had been dust for centuries. Each stone bore symbols that predated written language, spirals and crescents and shapes that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. This was a place of power, where the veil between worlds was thin enough to step through. I'd spent the day preparing, not just physically, but mentally. Cain had taught me that the most important battles were won in the mind before they ever reached the body. I'd meditated by my mother's grave, drawing strength from her memory. I'd walked the borders of the territory, feeling the ebb and flow of the magical currents that ran beneath the earth. Most importantly, I'd made peace with the possibility that I might not survive the night. "She's coming," Luna whispered in my mind, and I felt her presence like a storm on the horizon. Raven emerged from the tree line like a queen of shadows, her black hair flowing behind her like a banner of war. She'd changed since our fight by the lake. Gone was any pretense of humanity. Her eyes blazed with purple fire, and the air around her shimmered with barely contained magic. She wasn't just angry anymore. She was magnificent and terrible, a force of nature given form. Behind her walked figures I hadn't expected to see. Other exiles, other outcasts who had somehow found their way to her banner. I recognized some of them from the rogue camps, wolves who had been cast out by various packs over the years. They watched the proceedings with hungry eyes, eager to see the established order brought low. "Last chance to reconsider," she called out as she entered the circle. "Join me and we can rule together. Oppose me and I'll make your death as slow as possible." "I've made my choice," I replied, feeling my own power rising to meet hers. "The question is whether you're brave enough to face the consequences of yours." She laughed, wild and free. "Brave? Cousin, I am fear itself." The challenge began without ceremony. There were no formal declarations, no ritual words, just two forces of nature colliding in a space too small to contain them. Raven struck first, sending a wave of shadow creatures racing toward me. They moved like liquid darkness, shapeless and hungry, seeking to drain the life from everything they touched. I met them with silver fire, burning them away before they could reach me. But more kept coming. "You can't burn away the darkness," Raven called out, her voice echoing strangely in the night air. "It's part of you just like it's part of me. Stop fighting what you are." She was right in a way. I could feel the darkness in me, the anger, the pain, the desire for revenge that I'd carried for 16 years. But I'd learned something in my time in the wilderness that Raven hadn't. Darkness wasn't the enemy. The enemy was letting it consume you. Instead of fighting the shadows, I embraced them. I let them flow through me, around me, becoming part of my power instead of opposing it. The silver fire that had been my signature began to change, taking on depths and complexities I'd never imagined. Raven's eyes widened in shock as her own shadows turned against her, wrapping around her limbs like chains. "Impossible," she breathed. "Not impossible," I said, advancing on her. "Just unexpected. You've spent so long hating the light that you forgot darkness can be a tool instead of a master." She snarled and broke free of the shadow chains, her power exploding outward in a wave that sent several of the watching pack members stumbling backward. Clever. But cleverness won't save you. The real battle began then. We fought with everything we had, magic and claws, fire and shadow, the accumulated power of bloodlines that stretched back to the dawn of our kind. The stone circle cracked beneath our feet. The very air seemed to scream. Around us, the watching wolves pressed back as far as they could while still maintaining the circle. Some of them were crying, whether from fear or grief or something else entirely, I couldn't tell. Children clung to their parents, wide-eyed with terror and wonder. But as we fought, I began to notice something. Raven's attacks were becoming more desperate, less controlled. She was pouring everything into each strike, holding nothing back. It was the fighting style of someone who had nothing left to lose. "You're dying," I realized, dodging a particularly vicious blast of dark energy. "The curse, it's killing you too." Her laugh was bitter. "Blood magic always demands a price." I knew that when I started. Then why? Because some things are worth dying for, she screamed, and for a moment her mask slipped completely. I saw the frightened 7-year-old girl underneath all that power and rage. "Because they have to pay. They have to understand what they did." And suddenly I understood. This wasn't about revenge anymore, if it ever had been. This was about a child who had been so badly broken that she'd rather destroy herself than live with the pain. I could have pressed my advantage then. She was weakening, her magic becoming erratic. I could have ended it quickly and cleanly. Instead, I did something that surprised us both. I stopped fighting. "What are you doing?" Raven demanded, her hands still crackling with energy. "I'm listening," I said simply. For 16 years, no one listened to either of us. No one cared about our pain or our fear or our anger. Maybe it's time that changed. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "This is a battle to the death, not a therapy session. Is it?" I looked around at the watching pack members, then back at her. Or is it just two broken children trying to make sense of a world that never wanted them? "Don't," she whispered, and I could hear the cracks forming in her voice. "Don't you dare try to psychoanalyze me. I'm not analyzing anything," I said gently. I'm just saying that I understand. The rage, the need to make them hurt the way they hurt us. I've felt all of it. But Raven, this isn't healing. This is just spreading the poison. They deserve it, she said. But her voice was smaller now, less certain. Maybe they do, I agreed. But what about the children? What about the wolves who weren't even born when we were exiled? Do they deserve to die for crimes they didn't commit? She was crying now, tears streaming down her face even as power continued to radiate from her skin. I don't know how to stop, she whispered. I don't know how to be anything other than angry. Then let me help you, I said, extending my hand toward her. Let me show you another way. For a moment, I thought she might take it. I saw hope flicker in her purple eyes, saw the child she'd once been reaching out for comfort. But then her expression hardened again. It's too late, she said. I've gone too far, done too much. There's no redemption for someone like me. There's redemption for everyone, I said firmly. But you have to choose it. She shook her head. I can't. I won't. They have to pay. Lyra, they have to. The attack came without warning, but not from Raven. A crossbow bolt wreathed in silver fire shot out from the crowd of watchers, aimed directly at her heart. She was too weak to dodge, too distracted to defend herself. I moved without thinking, throwing myself between her and the bolt. It took me in the shoulder, spinning me around and sending me crashing to the ground. Silver fire raced through my veins like liquid agony, and I screamed. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The bolt wasn't just silver. It was enchanted, designed specifically to kill supernatural creatures. I could feel it burning through my system, trying to shut down my heart. Lyra. Raven dropped to her knees beside me, her hands hovering over the wound. Why? Why would you? Because, I gasped, fighting through the pain. Everyone deserves a chance at redemption. Even us. I looked past her to see Marcus Ironwood lowering the crossbow, his face twisted with hatred. She's a monster, he snarled. They both are. We should have killed them years ago. Marcus, stand down, Darius commanded, but the damage was done. Raven's face went blank with shock, then twisted with renewed rage. You see? She said to me, her voice deadly quiet. You see what they really think of us? You saved my life, and they still call us monsters. Raven, don't. But it was too late. The betrayal had pushed her over the edge she'd been teetering on. Power exploded from her in a wave that sent everyone except me flying backward. When the light faded, she was standing in the center of a circle of scorched earth, her eyes blazing like purple suns. You want a monster? She screamed at the cowering pack members. I'll give you a monster. She raised her hands, and I could feel her gathering power for a spell that would kill everyone in the circle. The curse had been child's play compared to what she was preparing now. This would be genocide, the complete annihilation of every living thing within a mile radius. The air itself began to tear, reality bending under the weight of her fury. Dark energy poured from wounds in the fabric of existence, and I could hear the screams of things that should never have been given voice. I had one chance. One moment before she unleashed hell on earth. I reached deep inside myself, past the pain and the silver fire burning in my veins, and found the core of my power. Not the magic I'd learned or the strength I'd built, but the love I'd carried for 16 years. Love for the mother I'd barely known. Love for the pack that had rejected me. Love for the broken girl standing over me with murder in her eyes. I forgive you, I whispered, and somehow my voice carried across the entire circle. I forgive all of you. The words hit Raven like a physical blow. She staggered backward, her spell dissolving into harmless sparks. What? I forgive you, I repeated, struggling to sit up despite the bolt still lodged in my shoulder. For the curse, for the deaths, for all of it. And I forgive them too. For the exile, for the fear, for the hatred. I forgive everyone. You can't, she said desperately. You can't just forgive. It doesn't work that way, doesn't it? I smiled through the pain. Watch. I placed my hand on the ground and let my power flow out. Not the silver fire of destruction, but something else entirely. Something warm and healing and infinitely patient. It spread through the earth like roots, touching every member of the pack, washing away the curse that had been killing them. But more than that, it touched their hearts. I felt their shock, their shame, their sudden understanding of what they had done to two innocent children. The weight of their guilt hit them like an avalanche, and several of them fell to their knees. The magic I was channeling wasn't just healing, it was truth. For the first time in their lives, every member of the pack could feel exactly what Raven and I had experienced. The terror of a 6-year-old child being cast into the wilderness. The desperate hunger of the first winter. The crushing loneliness of growing up without family or home. They felt it all, and it broke them. "I'm sorry," Darius whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Lyra, I'm so sorry. Both of you. What we did was unforgivable." Around the circle, other voices joined his. Pack members who had watched our exiles in silence were now sobbing with remorse. Even Marcus, who had shot the bolt, was on his knees with his face buried in his hands. "Maybe," I said gently. "But I'm forgiving it anyway." Raven was staring at me like I'd performed a miracle. "How?" she breathed. "How can you just let it go?" "Because holding on to it was killing me," I said honestly. "Just like it's killing you. The anger, the hatred, the need for revenge. It's poison, Raven. And the only antidote is forgiveness." She collapsed then, all the fight going out of her at once. She looked so young, so broken, that my heart ached for her. The terrible power that had been radiating from her skin flickered and died, leaving behind only a frightened young woman who had never learned how to heal. "I don't know how," she whispered. "I don't know how to forgive." "Then let me teach you," I said, extending my hand again despite the agony in my shoulder. "Let me show you what I learned in the wilderness. That survival isn't about becoming stronger than your enemies. It's about becoming better than your pain." This time she took my hand. The moment our fingers touched, something extraordinary happened. Our powers merged, light and shadow dancing together in perfect harmony. The silver fire in my veins cooled to a gentle warmth, while the darkness in her began to shine like starlight. Around us, the pack watched in wonder as two broken children finally found their way home. The very air seemed to sing with possibility, and I felt the ancient magic of the stone circle responding to our union. This was what the place had been built for. Not battles or challenges, but healing, reconciliation, the mending of things that had been torn apart. The bolt in my shoulder dissolved into silver dust, the wound closing as if it had never been. Raven's tears stopped flowing, replaced by something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Peace. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. I looked around at the faces surrounding us, some guilty, some afraid, but all of them human. All of them capable of change. The pack that had exiled us was gone, replaced by something smaller and humbler and infinitely more honest. "Now we heal," I said simply. "All of us, together." Darius stepped forward hesitantly, his face still wet with tears. "Lyra, I know I have no right to ask, but will you stay? Will you help us rebuild what we've broken?" I considered the question carefully. The pack that had exiled me was gone, replaced by something smaller and humbler, and infinitely more honest. These wolves had seen the consequences of their cruelty and chosen to change. "Maybe that was worth something. I'll stay," I said finally. "But not as your Luna or your savior. I'll stay as Lyra Nightshade, and I'll help you build something better than what came before." "And me?" Raven asked uncertainly. "You'll stay too," I said firmly. "This pack owes you a childhood they can never give back. The least they can do is offer you a future." She nodded slowly, hope beginning to bloom in her purple eyes for the first time in 15 years. As the sun began to rise over the Shadowmoon territory, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, I felt something I hadn't experienced since I was 6 years old. I felt like I was home. The exiles who had come with Raven stepped forward one by one, their own stories of rejection and abandonment written in the scars they carried. But instead of anger, I saw curiosity in their eyes. hope even. If two of the most broken among them could find healing, maybe there was a chance for all of them. "There's room for everyone," I said, addressing them directly. "If you want it. If you're willing to help us build something new." One by one, they nodded. The age of exile was ending. The age of redemption had begun. 6 months later, the Shadowmoon Pack was nothing like it had been before the curse. Gone were the rigid hierarchies and the obsession with strength above all else. In their place was something new, a community built on understanding, acceptance, and the hard-won knowledge that everyone deserves a second chance. Raven had become our head healer, using her magic to help rather than harm. She still struggled with forgiveness, both giving it and accepting it, but she was learning. We all were. Her cottage at the edge of the territory had become a sanctuary for wounded creatures, both supernatural and mundane. Children who had once feared her now brought her injured birds and broken-winged butterflies, trusting her to make them whole again. Darius had stepped down as Alpha King, passing the title to a younger wolf named Elena Stormwind, one of the exiles who had returned with Raven. She understood that leadership was about service, not dominance, having learned the lesson through her own years of suffering. He spent his days working in the gardens that had once belonged to my mother, trying to grow something beautiful from the ashes of his mistakes. The memorial garden had become the heart of our new community. Each plant represented a life that had been lost, not just to the curse, but to the old ways of thinking that had torn so many families apart. Darius tended it with the devotion of a penitent, and slowly, impossibly, things began to grow. And me? I found my place not as a ruler or a savior, but as a teacher. I helped young wolves learn to control their powers, showed them that being different wasn't the same as being wrong. I made sure that no child would ever again be cast out for failing to meet someone else's definition of perfection. The school I established was unlike anything the werewolf world had ever seen. We taught not just combat and pack hierarchy, but empathy, critical thinking, and the lost arts of our ancestors. Raven and I worked together to recover the old knowledge that had been suppressed for generations, teaching our students about the full spectrum of supernatural abilities. Sometimes, late at night, I would stand by the lake where Raven and I had first fought and think about the paths that had led us here. The pain was still there, it always would be, but it no longer defined us. We had chosen to transform our suffering into something meaningful, our anger into compassion. The stone circle had been transformed as well. Instead of a place of challenge and conflict, it had become a place of ceremony and celebration. We held our full moon gatherings there, bringing together not just our pack, but representatives from other communities who were interested in our new way of doing things. Word of our transformation had spread throughout the supernatural world. Other packs were beginning to question their own traditions, their own assumptions about strength and weakness. Some resisted, clinging to the old ways, but others were ready for change. It wasn't a perfect ending. There were still bad days, still moments when the old hurts threatened to overwhelm us. Raven sometimes woke screaming from nightmares about her exile. I still flinched when people raised their voices in anger. The pack members who had witnessed our suffering carried their own guilt and trauma, but we faced them together, as family should. As we should have from the beginning. The abandoned cubs had come home at last, not as conquerors or victims, but as healers. And in healing others, we had finally learned to heal ourselves. On quiet evenings, when the work was done and the territory was peaceful, Raven and I would sit by my mother's grave and talk about the future. About the children we were raising who would never know the fear of abandonment. About the world we were building where strength was measured not by the ability to dominate, but by the courage to forgive. "Do you think she would be proud?" Raven asked one such evening, gesturing toward the headstone. I considered the question, thinking about the woman I barely remembered but whose love had sustained me through the darkest times. "I think she would be amazed," I said finally. "Not just by what we've accomplished, but by who we've become." The moon was rising, full and silver, casting everything in gentle light. Somewhere in the distance, young wolves were laughing as they played in the gardens. The sound of children's joy in a place that had once known only sorrow felt like the greatest magic of all. We had broken the cycle. The abandoned had become the protectors. The exiled had become the healers. And for the first time in our lives, we were truly home. Thank you for joining me on this journey of redemption and forgiveness. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more supernatural tales. Remember, we all have the power to choose love over hatred, healing over revenge. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is forgive, not for others, but for yourself. What did you think of Lyra and Raven's story? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads. Until next time, may you find the strength to transform your pain into purpose.